When I was a 13-14-year-old child, I used to love spending time with my grandmother. My parents and I would visit her at least 2 times every month. My parents also enjoyed her company, but I was her only grandchild, so she loved me very much. She used to make my favorite dishes, read me stories in bed, yes, even at 14, and tell me the stories about her childhood. I enjoyed every second with her. Now, I don't know what went on, but when I was 14, something happened and my parents didn't tell me much about it, only that my grandmother was considered mentally unstable, and we had to stop visiting her. I remember being really sad and crying a lot because my parents would never let me see her again. She used to live in another city, so I couldn't even run away to her house if I wanted to. I missed my grandmother very much. I was really sad for 3 to 4 months. After that time, it was like she was dead to me. I couldn't see her, couldn't talk to her. My parents always told me it was for her own good, and I believed them. I had barely finished high school and dropped out of college because I was a failure, and, in those moments, I almost forgot about my grandmother. I lived at my parents' house until I was 27 years old and decided to move out after saving enough money to start a business doing small jobs. My business was kind of booming. I wasn't a millionaire yet or anything, but now I was able to support myself and, dare I say, I was even ready to start a family. After a while, I went to visit my grandmother, who was no longer hospitalized. She was easily over 75 years old now, and nostalgia washed over me as I looked around her house. I shed a tear and smiled. She greeted me with teary eyes and a big hug, didn't let go of me for a good minute, then sat me down and had her maid prepare a delicious lunch for me. We sat on her bed and talked for hours, talking about her food, which used to be my favorite. We were both crying and smiling all the time. She didn't seem crazy or mentally unstable at all. She was still the nice, kind, sweet lady she had always been. I asked what happened to her and why she had been sent to a mental clinic. From this point on, her smile disappeared. She got up, walked to the window and looked out. I followed her, watching her eyes shine with a faraway look. Then she said, "I don't know, David, but it's okay now." She looked sad about it, so I decided not to ask any more questions about this sensitive subject. It was bright and sunny when I arrived at her house, but when the night came and it was time for me to leave, it started to heavily rain. I couldn't drive my motorcycle back home, and, to be honest, I wanted to spend a few more hours with my grandmother, sleep in late and then go back to my house in the morning. I mentioned this to her, and her already pale face grew paler, and she shook her head. She insisted I'd get a cab and go home, but I smiled and said, "Grandma, I don't want to leave, coming back to you, and your house is so nostalgic for me. It's raining a lot and can you please tell me some stories from your childhood before I go to sleep?" She smiled back. But there was some reluctance on her face. I asked her directly, "Is something bothering you, Grandma?" She sighed and sat me down on her bed. "Do you believe I'm crazy, honey?" she asked me. "No, Grandma, I think you're fine." "Why? What happened?" I anxiously asked. "I know you might not believe me, but I was never crazy. This house is cursed." I know it sounds crazy that an old lady is saying this, but that was the reason I was indeed labeled crazy. A tear emerged from her eyes and rolled down her cheek. "This house is not safe to stay in from midnight until 6 a.m. That's why, when you were 14, I stopped you and your parents from coming to my house. When they asked me why, I said the real reason, but they didn't believe me. Nobody believed the truth, neither the doctors nor the psychiatrist. So I had to accept being institutionalized so I wouldn't sell this house and make someone else's life a living hell, and I could carry that burden alone." Honey, I could actually die at any moment, and I just wanted to share this with you, but I never had the courage. Her body shook. I hugged her, comforted her, and asked what I had to do to stay safe from such a curse. Follow these rules to the end to survive the night. Survive. Is it really that serious? She nodded, grabbed a piece of paper from her nightstand, asked me to read it, and make sure I obeyed everything written there. The paper said. Rule number 1. If one of the backyard swings starts to sway by itself, don't look at it. If you look at it, then sit on the swing that's not moving and say, "Hey James. How was your day?" You have to stay at the same place until the swing stops moving. It may take a few seconds or half an hour, at the most. Rule number 2. If you wake up during the night, check the time. If it's between 3 and 3:30 a.m., close your eyes and pretend you're asleep. It's not nice to make James angry. If you stand up, talk or even move too much, he will attack you. And to consider him as a sadist would be an understatement. In the best case scenario, you may lose a limb or two. Believe me when I say it doesn't do you any good to want to figure out the worst case scenario. Rule number 3. If you hear grandma scream, don't get out of bed and just go back to sleep. It doesn't matter how painful or traumatizing the screams are. If you step out to help, you'll be forever trapped in a universe that will be an exact replica of our own, only minus the humans and animals. You will starve or go crazy from loneliness, as there is no way to bring you back from there. Rule number 4. If you wake up feeling sick, passing by the kitchen sink or the backyard, with the exception of Rule 2, don't go into a bathroom. It is the entity's whole plan to isolate you in one of the bathrooms. So cherish your slow, painful death and your screams of agony. Rule number 5. If you see through a window a boy or a girl who looks like you did when you were 4 or 5 years old, standing in the backyard, immediately grab the pistol tucked under your pillow and shoot. Failure to do so will not kill you, but it will make it mentally torture you for the rest of your life. Rule number 6. If you need to drink water, don't drink anything from the fridge. Instead, use the mini fridge, which is located in the living room. Opening the ordinary refrigerator is not safe because of the smell of raw meat, as it will attract unwanted attention. Rule number 7. If the fan stops working, get up and run into the living room. Fans will go down in every room except the living room, which is bordered by a line of salt on all sides, which, somehow, manages to keep at least the room fan there. I looked over at my sad grandmother. She sighed and asked me to follow the rules. At midnight that day, I walked into my childhood bedroom and looked out the window at the tree that had been planted when I was born. I could barely see the little boy peeking out from behind the tree. He looked like me when I was 5.